Hi, Gabriel here from the NYC Guitar School, and I'm here today to present Beyond Basics. Now, Beyond Basics is a video series where I'm going to be looking at the tools we need to accrue to push our playing to the next step. This is really for intermediate to advanced guitarists. If you've got a handle on things like bar chords and your major and minor scales and your pentatonic scales, this is exactly the kind of course that will really help take your playing to that next level. This is the first installment of the course, and I'm going to be talking about how we can harmonize the major scale, how we can find chords from this, and how we can look at these chords and we can invert those chords to be able to play them in every single way, every variation on the guitar neck. So let's start off with a quick recap of the major scale. Now, the major scale is constructed of a set of intervals, and they progress in this fashion. We have a whole step, a whole step, and a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and finally a half step. That is a fixed set of intervals that we can use to play every single major scale on the guitar. Now, we're going to use G major as our example. G is a really guitar-friendly key. So let's start with the note G. I'm on the 3rd fret of the 6th string in this example, and I'm just going to play up using a single position shape. I switch between single position and 3-note per string. This is something we'll cover later on in this course, as it's a way that can open up the fretboard. But today, we're talking about chords. So let's talk about the G major scale. So G is our first note. We're going to move up a whole step from G, which gives us A. A whole step from A is B. Half step is C. Then we're going to go a whole step to D, a whole step to E, whole step to F sharp, and then a half step's going to take us back to G. That's our G major scale: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. So we're going to look at how we can form chords. The first type of chord that we're going to be looking at is triads. Triads are 3-note chords. A triad is formed from something called the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. Now, these are the intervals that we're going to use to play each chord. Let's start with the G major chord. The first refers to the root note of the chord. In this case, it would be a G. The next note we would refer to is the 3rd. This means we're going to count 3 notes up through the current scale. So we're going to go G is our first, A is our second, so our 3rd is B. So we have G and B. The next note is our 5th, so we're going to carry on going. We're going to go 3, 4, 5. Our 5th is D. So we have G, B, and D. Those are 3 notes we need to play a G major chord. Okay, so let's look at how we can play that on the guitar neck. So let's look at the lowest example we can find first of all. So we're going to be starting on the G on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, the B on the 2nd fret of the 5th, and the open 4th string on D. So this is what we would call a root inversion of a G major triad. Now, we can find these all over the neck. We can look based off the 5th string. Our G would be on the 10th fret in this instance. We would have a B on the 9th fret of the 4th string, and a D on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. You can hear that's an octave higher. We can find another one from the 4th string. We're going to be on the 5th fret for the G, the 4th fret of the 3rd for the B, 3rd fret of the 2nd for the D. Lastly, we have one more inversion of a root position triad G major. We're going to play the G on the 12th fret of the 3rd string, the B on the 12th fret of the 2nd string, and the D on the 10th fret of the 1st string. So these are all of our root position G major triads. So we know a root position. We can also invert these chords. So when we take an inversion, all that means is we're taking the lowest note of the current chord and we're going to put it to the top. So a first inversion, we would take the G, our first, and we would put that as the highest voice in this chord. So where we had G, B, D, now we're going to have B, D, G. And that's our first inversion. Again, we can practice this all over the neck. So if we had B, D, G, we would be on the 7th fret of the 6th string. That's our B. Our D would be the 5th fret of the 5th, and our G would be 5th fret of the 4th. Likewise, we can find that on all of the other groups of strings. So let's look at the, we start with a B on the 2nd fret of the 5th, D open on the 4th string, and G open. So we've gone. Let's move up the octave this time. We're going to play B on the 9th fret of the 4th string. We're going to play D 7th fret of the 3rd, and we're going to play G 8th fret of the 2nd. And lastly, our final inversion, we're going to play B on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, D on the 3rd fret of the 2nd, and G on the 3rd fret of the 1st. Okay, cool. One last inversion with our 5th as a root note now, so our D is going to be the lowest note in the chord. It's going to go D, G, B. Let's find the 2nd inversion. We could play our D on the 10th fret of the E string. We play our G, 10th fret of the 5th string, and our B could be 9th fret of the 4th string. We can play the same shape on the 5th fret of the 5th string, 5th fret of the 4th string, 4th fret of the 3rd. How about we play it on off the 4th string? We can find our D on the 12th fret, or open. Let's play it open, it's more fun. So open on the 4th string for our D, our G, 3rd string open, and our B, 2nd string open. Lastly, let's check out how we can play it on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. So our D would be on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, our G would be on the 8th fret of the 2nd, and our B, 7th fret of the 1st. Now you may recognize some of these shapes from open chords. For example, this inversion looks like a D-type chord, this one looks like an A-type chord, and this is kind of how the cage system relates to triads. Now, the cage system, of course, is looking at 6-string chords, and when we look at a 6-string chord, what we're doing is we're looking at something called note doubling. Now, note doubling is one of the facets of guitar playing that we learn how to do early on without realizing it. It's a thing that's built into a lot of the grips, the chord shapes that we learn as beginner and intermediate guitarists. If we take an open G chord, for example, we can see that we have the bottom G, B, D, our triad is there at the bottom. Then we can view that we have a G, a B, and a G. So we can see that G, the note G, has been doubled, in effect, it's played 3 times within this chord shape. Likewise, we can see our B, our 3rd has been doubled. Now there is some process to this when we talk about note doubling. So typically we want to start with note doubling by doubling the root of the chord. So let's look at playing inversions of a G major chord up and down the neck this time, and then we're going to double some of the notes. So for this, for note doubling, I like to double a note in a lower octave. I use this technique as a way of playing bigger sounding chords, in particular if I was playing just solo guitar, or I was accompanying a vocalist, or playing in like an acoustic setting where I wanted my guitar to sound bigger than just these little triad chord shapes. So let's look at this triad based off the 5th fret of the 4th string. I'm going to play a G chord here, so 5 on the 4, 4 on the 3rd, 3rd on the 2nd. Okay, so there's my G major triad. It doesn't sound very big at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double the root chord, the G. So I'm going to double that on the 6th string by playing the 3rd fret. Now this may look similar to a chord shape that you already know. We could see this as kind of a skeleton version of our G major bar chord. Now what's happening in that G major bar chord? We're doubling the root note on the top, and we're doubling the 5th of the chord, the D, on the 5th fret of that 5th string. But as you'll see later, it's hard to play all of these note doubled chords with full 6 strings. So for this, we're going to just look at the 6th string and then the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd. So that is our G major triad with the G note doubled. Let's invert the chords. So we have G, B, D. Let's put B in the bottom. So I'm on the 9th fret, the 7th fret, and the 8th fret of the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings with my first inversion G major chord. Now I want to double the 3rd of the chord because what I'm doing here, I'm trying to reinforce the sound of the inversion. So for example, sometimes as a guitarist you'll be given a chord sheet and you'll see something like G over B, G slash B. That slash chord, that second note that you can see is our root note. So for instance, if I was playing a chord progression and I came across a G over B, I need to be able to grab that straight away. Of course you can do that just by modifying your normal chord shapes, but sometimes you end up in an instant where like you would automatically go to grab a 3rd fret bar chord G shape, and then if you want to put the B in the bass, you you'd be taking the lowest 3 notes out of the chord and you end up with this. And that's not a very big sounding chord. A lot of instances that's great, but sometimes you want that full sounding chord. So how are we going to get that third in the bass? What you're going to do is we're going to take this first inversion, we're going to double that third. Now there is a rule in music theory, well this sounds fine, but the rule in music theory dictates that you want more stable voices than unstable voices, and the third of a chord, even though it tells you the chord quality, is not a stable voice. So this doesn't sound rested. This wants to resolve. So how do we make it sound rested? Well, what we can do, rather than doubling the third of the chord, we're going to leave the third in the bottom, but what we can do is we can modify this note. We can modify the second third that's doubled, and we can move it down, so we're going to double the root note. So rather than playing the 9th fret, we're going to move down and we're going to double the root down here. So we're going to go B on the 7th fret of the 6th string, but now we're going to play the G on the 5th fret of the 4th string. And can you hear how much more rested that sounds? It doesn't have this tension that wants to resolve anymore that this chord shape did. So this is what I would use if I wanted a broad sounding first inversion G chord. So I could move up like this. I could go root inversion, first inversion. Okay, so let's check out the second version. So we have our second version could be played on the 12th fret, okay? Again, we're going to double the 5th by playing the 10th fret of the 6th string. So we're playing 12th fret on the 4th, 3rd and 2nd, and 10th fret on the 6th string. Now in this instance, we don't need to alter the 5th because a 5th is a stable voice. So we can keep this as our own version. So finally we have root inversion, first inversion, second inversion. Okay, let's look at another string group. How about we transpose this to the key of C major? So we have the notes C, E, and G. We're going to play these on the upper string group on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. So we're going to play our C on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, our E on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, our G on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. We're going to double our root note. That is our root position C major chord. Now let's invert that chord, so let's put our 3rd in the bass. Now we can play, we can double that 3rd, and we'd be playing the 9th fret and the 8th fret and the 8th fret on the 3rd, 2nd and 1st string, and I'd be doubling the 3rd on the 7th fret of the 5th string, but again, that doesn't sound stable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 3rd down to the E on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, so I'm going to be playing 5, 8, 8. Now this is a little awkward for the fingering. You could play it with your 3rd and 4th finger and grab that 3rd with your 2nd finger. And that works just fine. Or the alternative would be to bar with your 4th finger. They're both are kind of awkward, but both may find either shape suitable. So we have our root inversion, we have our first inversion. Now let's check out our second inversion. So we have G, C, E, that would be on the 12th fret of the 3rd string, 13th fret of the 2nd string, 12th fret of the 1st string. Now we want to grab our G, and our G would be found on the 10th fret of the 5th string. So our 3 inversions would be C, down here with our 3rd fret and the 5th string, E with our 7th fret of the 5th, and our G on the 10th fret of the 5th. So these are all the major chord inversions. But what about minor chords? So a minor chord has what's called a flattened third. So what that means is we take the 3rd note of the chord, in the example of G major it would be the B, and we flatten it, we take it down half a step, so it would be B flat in this instance. We'd have G, B flat, and D. You can clearly hear the difference between those two chords. Okay, so let's invert that chord. So that would be our root inversion based off the 6th string, G, B flat, and D. Let's build that chord off the 5th string. We'd have G on the 10th fret of the 5th string, B flat on the 8th fret of the 4th string, and D on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. Let's look at the next place we can play it. We can have G on the 5th fret of the 4th string, B flat on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string, D on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and finally we can see G on the 12th fret of the 3rd string, B flat on the 11th fret of the 2nd string, and D on the 10th fret of the 1st string. So we've had G minor here, G minor here, G minor here, and lastly G minor here. Again, we can invert these chords, so let's have a look on our lowest 6th string first. G would move to B flat would move to D, and D would move to G. B flat, D, G. Let's look at it in the next position. We've got G based off the 5th string on the 10th, 8th, and 7th frets. We can move up to grab the B flat on the 13th fret of the 5th string, D on the 12th fret, and G on the 12th fret. Likewise, let's look at the 4th string. We have a G, B flat, and D on the 5th, 3rd, and 3rd. G would move up to the 8th fret of the 4th string. D can be found on the 7th fret of the 3rd, and G on the 8th fret of the 2nd. And finally, let's check out our final string set. So G on the 12th fret, B flat on the 11th, D on the 10th. We can move that up to 15, or we can jump down an octave, which I think would be more usable. So let's look B flat on the 3rd fret, our D on the 3rd fret also, and our G also on the 3rd fret. So all of those inversions we had here, 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 and here. Let's check out our second inversion. So D is going to be in the bottom now. So we have D on the 10th fret of the 6th string, G on the 10th fret of the 5th, and B flat is going to be found on the 8th fret, 8th fret of the 4th string. Let's check out the next string grouping. So D on the 5th fret, G on the 5th fret, B flat on the 3rd, 12th fret of the 4th string, 12th fret of the 3rd, 11th fret this time of the 2nd string, and lastly 7th fret of the 3rd, 8th fret of the 2nd, 6th fret of the 1st. So we've had so those are all our versions of a minor chord. Let's do the same thing with the note doubling. So we'll use the G minor again. So we're going to use the same string groups, so the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings, and the 5th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. We're going to double the root. That's a great sounding chord. Okay, let's do the same thing again. So B flat would be on the 6th fret. Now with a minor chord, the interval between that's formed with the flattened third isn't as unstable, so we can play the doubled flattened third and it sounds really good, and that's a very useful shape to know. But again, we can look at doubling the root if we want, so we can move the flattened third down to the G on the 5th fret of that 4th string. That sounds a little less like a minor chord, so that's a really nice colour to have as well. So we would have doubled flattened third or the doubled root. Okay, lastly with the final inversion, so we could play our second inversion of a G minor chord here on that 12th, 12th and 11th fret of the 4th, 3rd and 2nd string, and we can double our we can double our 5th with a D on the 10th fret of the 6th string. Let's check out the next string grouping, and we'll do the same thing. We'll play C minor. So we would have C, E, G of a C major chord. So the E, the third, is going to be flattened to become E flat of a C minor chord. So we'd have the notes C, E flat, and G on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd frets of the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. We're going to double that C, that root note, and find that on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Okay, cool. Let's move up to the first inversion. So our E flat is going to be in the root. Now our C is going to move to the E flat. Our E flat is going to move to the G. And our G is going to move to the C. So we're on the 8th fret of the top 3 strings, 3, 2, 1, and the 6th fret to play that E flat. Sounds great. Again, we can also revoice the chord by moving that flattened third back down to the root, so we're only playing the flat third in the bass of the chord. And then we have C on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, G on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and C again. Or, okay, lastly we have a final inversion, so we'd have G on the 12th fret of the 3rd string, C on the 13th fret of the 2nd, E flat on the 11th fret of the 1st, and we're going to double our 5th of the chord, the G, so again we're going to play G on the 10th fret of the 5th string. So all 3 inversions in a row, we're going to have root inversion, C minor, first inversion with the doubled C, and lastly our second inversion of the chord. Okay, so that's all we need to know about harmonizing the scale to form triads, inverting those triads, and note doubling. Now we can push further with note doubling, and you can look at finding other doubles for the chord. So let's check out, go back to G major for the example. So we had our fully doubled chord, our G major bar chord that we know, with the doubled, with 3 notes, 3 root notes, and 2 fifths, originating from a root position triad with the doubled root in the bass, doubled root in the top, and a second doubled fifth sat between the 2 root notes. Let's check out our first inversion. Now remember, we wanted to double our root of the chord whilst keeping the 3rd in the bass. We can also find another 5th on the 5th fret of the 5th string if we want to reinforce those note doubles. And you could, if you wanted, try and double a 3rd on the top, but remember, doubling the 3rd just makes it unstable, so we can keep it with the doubled 5th and the doubled root. Lastly, we have the second inversion. If we want to double the root, we can double that on the 10th fret of the 5th string, so we're barring across the 10th fret on the 6th and the 5th strings, and then barring across the 12th fret of the 4th and 2nd string. If you want, we could revoice it, and you can grab also the 5th on the 1st string, so I'd be barring across there with my 1st finger. It's a little bit awkward, I don't know if you can see how tight that bend is on my 3rd finger to get that bar. So you can experiment with note doubling as far as possible, but to be honest, I personally find it more useful to only have 1 double in for these kind of chord shapes. And it kind of depends on the muting. For example, it's a little tricky to mute this chord unless I'm playing fingerstyle, so I will just go in with the full bar, but this one is easier to mute using my 2nd finger. You could introduce that 2nd 5th if you want, but it's not necessary. And like that is with the root, I don't think it really adds that much. So have fun experimenting with these chord shapes. See how they can augment your playing, how you can develop the idea further. So I just want to say a huge thank you for checking out this video. If you made it this far, I hugely appreciate it. If you have made it this far, please like the video, leave a comment, tell me what you thought about this topic. Also leave any comments about things that you'd like to see. A huge thank you from myself, Gabriel, and the New York City Guitar School. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and hit that bell icon to receive notifications about every video we post. We're posting quite a few videos right now, so check out the channel, see the new content that's coming out. If you want to see more like this, check out our other videos. I've released a series on play-along, different technical workouts, and I did a little bit of a dive into legato and hybrid picking and sweep picking, like just some different picking techniques which you might find interesting. If you're interested in the Guitar School, please check out our website. There's tons of information there about how you can find a teacher. We're teaching online and in person in New York City. We teach one-on-one lessons, group lessons for beginners all the way up to advanced musicians. We teach music production, we teach people of every age group, and we also teach in group classes as well. So if you're looking to learn guitar with other people from a similar playing level of you, there's bound to be a group that you'll fit right into. We also have drop-in classes that are included in our memberships and a bunch of other perks. It's all on the website, so just check that out. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you in the next video.